Welcome everybody to another brand new episode of It's My Wrestling Podcast. I'm of course, as always, your host Chris Dees. Before we get started, as always, please make sure you hit subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, follow if you're listening to this on any audio platforms. Today's guest is a lady I'm very, very excited to speak to. We've been trying to work this out for a little while. I'm really going to be finally managed to sort it out. But she's one of the hottest rising stars in all of professional wrestling right now. And despite her infancy in the business, she has faced some top names, some absolute legends of the industry as well. She is, of course, the one and only, the reality check, Miss Madi Wrenkowski. Maddie, thank you for joining me. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Look, we were just saying before we started recording, it's a nice early one for me, 7 p.m. These things normally happen a lot later. I really appreciate you giving me your time. As like I said, we tried to arrange this a couple of times, but you were at NWA, weren't you? What were you doing over at NWA?
Wrestling.
Well, other than wrestling, obviously. Was it just
Duh. Come on.
normal NWA TV?
Yeah, so I was there for this whole past weekend when they shot the pay-per-view and tapings. So
Oh, yeah.
it was a very, very long couple of days.
Yeah, I can imagine. No, I've spoke to quite a few guests recently that have been at NWA. They've all had really great things to say about NWA. What was your experience like?
Oh, it was great. The locker room is incredible. Obviously, it's a female locker room that I was in, but it was incredible. Like the people are nice, and everyone was just very friendly, which is sometimes not always what you get in an all-girls locker room, but there are a few, and that is one of them.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, like I say, I only ever hear good things about NWA, so that's good to hear, especially from a fan's perspective. I'm gonna get right into it, and I wanna start off. So many podcasts always ask the same question at the start, like, "Oh, who was your favorite wrestler? What did you like watching when you were younger?" Blah blah blah. But I'm always interested to know, like, what was your sort of penny drop moment? What was the moment for you when you were like, "Boom, yes, I need to be a wrestler. I'm going to go and be a wrestler. This is what I have to do." Like, was it a particular match or a moment or a pay-per-view or anything like that?
Yeah, so I mean, kind of like you said, like what got me into wrestling was a little bit different, but like what made me choose to be a wrestler was probably when I was in college. I went to the NXT Texas tour. It was the first time really going on the road, and they came to Texas. So my brother took me, and I hadn't really kept up, and I never really watched NXT, but it was like, oh, hey, we can finally go to a show without like killing our wallets. So we went, and it was in like a smaller area, so it was a lot closer. Like you weren't like there were no nosebleeds. It was a smaller venue. So we went, and then they were doing this like some type of like multi-man tag match, and all of a sudden Enzo Amore and Big Cass came out, and they just started doing their whole spiel. And to see someone have that much power per se, like literally that venue was small, but that whole venue just roared like the entire like monologue with him. And so to see that, it was crazy because I feel like that's what you fall in love with when you watch wrestling. You fall in love with the people and the personalities, not necessarily the moves. And that's kind of what drew me back in. Like ever since that moment, I was like, okay, I need that power.
So you say like it drew you back in. Had you taken a bit of a break from wrestling? I know a lot of people do that. I took about a 5 or 6 year break, and I came back around the time of Daniel Bryan Yes movement. Like I just got
Yeah.
lucky. I came back at a really good time. Like, did you just take a while off? Was it just life? Did life get in the way?
Yeah, it was kind of like you grow up and like you are interested in certain things, and as you're growing up you kind of just fall off. And so at that point I was just like too cool for school, which included wrestling. uh, it just wasn't like there wasn't, I guess it didn't like I didn't connect with it.
Yeah.
Because when I did start, it was kind of early on, still the divas, but you still had people like Lita and Jazz who were different, who were like, okay, like they're not the typical pretty little package. And then further down the line, it kind of started getting not as diverse, um, if I would say so. And so it kind of fell off for me. But now wrestling is incredible with the diversity.
Yeah, I guess that's a really good point. I think like especially for women or for young girls watching at that time, if there's nothing for you to relate to on the TV, like it's easier for boys, isn't it? Easier for men because there's so much different diversity and so many different backgrounds. But for women, I think at that time that you mentioned, really outside of Jazz and Jacqueline, in terms of and Gail Kim as well, in terms of diversity, that was it.
Yeah.
There was absolutely nothing, and there were no different sort of like styles and backgrounds. Like you said, Lita was somebody who sort of like broke the mold a little bit, wasn't it? And sort of like inspired alternative girls, I guess you would say, different girls.
Yeah, but I would just even say more of like the tomboy girls, like the ones who
Yeah.
couldn't necessarily latch on to uh little Barbies. Like, of course people played with Barbies, but like I didn't relate with them. I didn't like see myself as a Barbie. Like I was just one of the boys. Like when I was growing up, I was friends with the neighborhood boys. We'd go out and like do hood rat stuff. I don't know. Suburbs though. So not like real hood rat stuff. Just like suburban hood rat stuff.
One of the names that you mentioned in there, and then I said as well, Jazz. Now I know you must have talked about this probably on every podcast that you ever do. I try not to watch other podcasts that my guests are on because I just want to ask questions that I want to know the answers to. It's not about like getting news or getting anything different out of my guests. So I interviewed Jazz. It was about 2 months ago. I interviewed
Oh,
Jazz, and she
wow.
was awesome. She was so nice, so friendly, so down to earth, and she actually mentioned you. So I wanted to come back around to that. I know, right? I know, right? She knows what she's talking about. When I spoke to her about you, that's when it dawned on me that that was actually your first match, wasn't it? Which
Yeah.
is insane. Like, how did that opportunity come about to face off against literally a legend in your first match?
Yeah. So the school that I chose to start my training off was a hybrid school of wrestling here in San Antonio, Texas. And Chris Marvel is the head coach at the time he opened it. He actually cares about his students, like shocker. So he brought in Jazz, Rodney Mack, and Funaki to the school to do a seminar, and from that seminar they actually stayed. So we were able to like get a larger facility. There's 4 rings, so like each coach had like their own ring to kind of like run. So at that moment when I first started like training and I was about to start performing, Jazz was actually my trainer. um, so it was actually a student versus trainer match for my first match ever. And it was terrifying, but I'm incredibly like, not many people can say that they got to wrestle a legend in their first match.
No, no, absolutely not. Like, how was that experience for you then? Did you learn a lot from that match? Obviously, if she was your trainer, then you would have obviously got tips and advice and help from her afterwards. But like, how did that match actually go?
Yeah, no, I was terrified. So one, just having the first match ever is terrifying. But then to go against Jazz, like what I feared this woman growing up, and now I'm going to be standing literally across the ring from her. Like that's insane. But as one does, I watched a lot of film study to like prepare, and literally like before every single match, everyone's chanting like "Jazz is gonna kill you," and I was like, "Yo, they're gonna do that," and I don't know what to like. I don't know how to respond because she probably is, and she did. And then as a true veteran, she knows that like the fight is not just in the ring, it's also mental. So like she made sure to tell me like every single day leading up, like I taught you some of what I know, not all of what I know. Just remember that. I'm like, Jess, I get it. Okay. You're gonna kick my butt.
Oh, that's mad. That's just a crazy like experience. Just like you say, like Jazz is a proper legend. Like I think was she the first ever black women's champion in WWE? I think she
She
might.
was, I
Yeah.
believe. Yeah.
And that's your first match. That's crazy. Funaki is another name that I really didn't expect you to drop in there. Funaki doesn't really come to mind when you think of great wrestling trainers. No disrespect to him, obviously,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's a bit strange. What about I read something not long ago about reality of wrestling as well. Like you went to obviously that's Booker T's school, reality of wrestling, but that obviously didn't work out. Was there a particular reason that didn't work out? Because
Uh, Houston, Texas. It's not my thing.
well, fair enough.
Yeah, he's located like right below Houston, and Houston's too busy for me. Um, and just when I went and like viewed hybrid before I even signed up to do it, it was just a totally different environment. Um, like I went in there and I'm a very dry, sarcastic person. And so the fact that like the trainer, Marvel, was able to like tit for tat, like keep up with my sarcasm, I was like, okay, this is it. If anyone can handle that from the get-go, like I think this might work out for me.
Yeah, that's another good point. Like, you shouldn't necessarily just go to where the biggest names are working. Like, if that's where it feels like you fit more, and look at what you've done just in these first couple of years. You obviously made the right choice because, like I said at the very start, I didn't just say that because you're on the show. You are genuinely making waves in the business. You know, I'm really keen to ask you about your time in AEW because you've obviously wrestled for them quite a few times already in this really short period of time. But I wanted to ask as well about Thunder Rosa because you've spent a lot of time over at her promotion, haven't you? Over at her school. She's awesome. I love
Yeah.
Thunder Rosa. I think she is a name that doesn't get talked about nearly enough in terms of like the best women's wrestlers today. So, have you spent much sort of like one-on-one time with her? Have you spent much time learning from Rosa?
Yeah, so I actually met her for the first time when I started at Hybrid. She had just moved to the Texas area. So she was like coming in sporadically to train because I think at that time she was signed to the NWA. So that's when I first had my encounter with her. And she is actually the one who ran Mission Pro as well back then. And so they're actually the ones who booked me for my first match against Jazz. Um, so I guess she has like some kind of thing for me, like where she wants me to die. Because ever since then, like all the mission shows, she puts me against killers like Holly Dead and La Rosa Negra and stuff. So I think they're just seeing whether or not like that's the last one for Maddie. But no, I'm super fortunate to have met her then. And since then, like her and Jazz and Rodney opened up the Dog Pound School for a little bit, and she was there training. And it was kind of it was a different style. She has a very different style, and since she has such a worldly background, we would do like warm ups that they did when she was in Japan, and like it was terrifying, but it was just like new. It was fresh. It was very different. But she also has a lot of experience in this business as a woman. I would say prior to like the Me Too movement, a lot of women in wrestling were not treated as well. And so she has definitely had a lot of experience with that. So she's kind of used her platform and everything that she's gone through to help these newer girls, such as myself, feel comfortable in the business or be able to kind of speak up for yourself. So she has helped me in more than just in the ring, wrestling business, but also just in life in general.
Yeah, that's good to hear. That's lovely to hear. Like you don't hear stories like that very often. You hear about wrestlers who just sort of like want to one up each other. It doesn't feel like a very other than Ring of Honor, who I've spoken to loads of their talent. The wrestling industry feels very I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for, but it doesn't. It feels like everybody's looking out for themselves. But one of the things
Yes, it's
I
very
always
selfish.
yeah, very selfish.
Yeah.
That's probably the best word. Yeah, very yeah, just sort of like scratch your own back sort of thing. But Ring of Honor and lots of the talent, lots of the women in AEW, and especially Thunder Rosa, she's one that I always hear about, is really keen to look out for, especially the younger talent, the younger girls coming through. Which
Yeah.
sounds exactly like that's the experience that you've had with her. I'm gonna have to ask about AEW then. So I was really keen to find out about AEW. You made your debut just under a year ago, I think it was. Layla Hirsch, yeah, on
Yes.
AEW Dark. You've since teamed with, you faced Nyla Rose, teamed with Nyla Rose, faced Britt Baker, Big Swole, Red Velvet, lots more. Like you've only been wrestling for 2 years, so it's sort of similar to the Jazz question. Like, how are these opportunities with AEW coming about so regularly? Because they obviously have some trust in you. They obviously know you, but you're not signed to AEW. So that's something I've always been curious about over like
Me
nearly
too.
30 years of being a wrestling fan. You always see the same people come back to work dark shows, don't you? So how does that happen?
I mean, I'm not entirely sure because I mean, I also question why I'm not signed all the time. Uh, but with the dark opportunity, again, I was very lucky to have Thunder Rosa in my corner. She kind of put a good word in for me and two of the other girls that were at Mission Pro. Um, and so a lot of people at that time were like, oh, like you're just there because of Thunder. And I'm like, yeah, I got to the door because of Thunder, but like I kicked that shit down. Like Thunder hasn't kept me there for a year. Like they're not like, oh, we got to do this favor for Thunder Rosa. Like, no, like my work and my ability has kept me there. Um, and why do they keep bringing me back? Obviously, because I'm great. I don't know. I think they do trust my ability to kind of have an idea of what I'm doing, an inkling at the least in my 2 years.
So yeah, that's a good point because I understand why people say that. You hear about Charlotte Flair all the time, don't you? Obviously, she got where she got to because of her dad. No, like her dad helped to get her the opportunity, sure, but her talent and her athleticism and her skill and all that kind of stuff is what's kept her where she is. Like, if it was all down to Thunder Rosa, you'd be on. I don't know. She'd probably get you on Dynamite having title matches. You know,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? If it was all about nepotism and favoritism and things like that, then you would be not to sound horrible, but you would be further ahead in AEW than you currently are. But the fact that you're doing all these dark appearances, elevation appearances, things like that, shows that you want to put in the hard work to get there off your own merits.
Yeah, and I think I am only 2 years in this business. And for me, watching when Thunder Rose was actually signed, like 6 years into her career, like she put in the blood, the sweat, the tears, like, and by the time that she got signed, she has like a huge fan base. And so, like, no matter where she comes out, no matter like what state she's in, the whole crowd just is like wild.
Yeah.
I feel like in my 2 years, I don't know anything, especially compared to like some of the great minds that AEW or any company really has. So I think that I am fine having to like go through this time period because there's great people like Mercedes Martinez who's been doing it 15 years before she saw anything, and she puts together and she puts on great matches. So this is like my learning time, like that's fine. Just when it comes time and that I have like the ability to do what I want, like on a platform like that, it'll be great.
Yeah, no, and like you say, it gives you more time to learn, but it also gives you time to learn what not to do. Gives you time to learn from your mistakes as well, because you are probably, not to be horrible, you are probably going to make mistakes, especially so young into your career. So if you were to just be thrust into the spotlight right now, thrust to the main, to the main event, to the top of the card, all it would do is lead to like I say, criticisms and fans saying, "Oh, she's only there because of Thunder Rosa." But if it takes you another year, just think of all the experiences you'd have had in that extra year
Yeah.
to draw
Yeah,
from.
because you see people get signed like all the time really young, and then you don't really see them. And then all of a sudden they pop up in like an 8-man tag, and you're like, oh, shoot, where's she been? Like, I don't want to just be like, I don't want to be a side piece. Like, I want to have like storylines. I want to like have my stuff mean something. I don't want to just be thrown in a random mixed tag or whatever. But in order to have that, I have to be someone. So
Yes.
I'm learning. I'm learning how to be okay with not just instantly getting that contract.
Yeah, completely agree. No, I think it's absolutely, without having any experience of the wrestling industry myself. Obviously, it sounds like the right way to do things. Have you had any conversations about doing more regular work for AEW or potentially signing some sort of deal, or is that not what you want to do right now? Do you want to wait?
I mean, there has been no conversation, but you know, but yeah, no. So I don't know. I'm just living. I'm getting all the opportunities that I can. Like I said, NWA was great. Being around those people, being able to talk to Billy Corgan and all of them, and have them like appreciate my work and tell me like, oh yeah, great job, like you did really good. I'm like, so I'll take what I can get, but I'm not entirely sure where the path leads.
I'm sure it's going to lead to huge things. Like I said, you've already had loads of huge things. There's been obviously all the AEW work, SWE Fury, the first ever match against Jazz, working with Thunder Rosa so much. What are your immediate plans for 2022? Because obviously we've had a really rough last year and a half. Things look like they were getting better, but they might be getting worse again with the whole new strand of COVID. So we don't know what's going to happen. But assuming everything's okay, obviously we're at the end of 2021 now, going into a whole brand new year where, fingers crossed, everything will be okay. What are your immediate plans? Like, is there anything that you want to achieve over the next 12 months? Japan, Mexico, anything like that?
I mean, one, I want to make it out of 2021.
Yeah, that would be nice. That'd be nice.
But I definitely, since things hopefully are opening up more as far as regulations and shows, I would love to travel more in the States for sure. I know I have a couple of bookings coming up in like Minnesota, North Carolina, just different states. But like, if it was possibility to like go out of the country, I know Japan just closed down, I think again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would love to go out of the I'd love to go out of the country, but I'm not sure how possible it is right now. But I think like when people leave and get that kind of experience, it does add to like their resume. It adds to their oomph, like they're more valuable at that point. So I think that's definitely something that I would like to look into. For sure, I definitely want to work WrestleMania weekend, whether it's just an indie show in Dallas, because it's literally like 4 hours from me. So it would be absurd not to go make that drive and at least like entertain some fans.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit difficult, isn't it, to make solid concrete plans at the moment. With it's just so uncertain. Like I thought
Yeah,
everything would be okay by now, but
yeah, and I feel like I don't necessarily know exactly how like overseas plans are trip. Wait, what? Overseas trips are planned,
yeah.
but I feel like that takes some like some really big planning.
Yeah, sort of just best to, like you say, play it by ear. Just see how things play out, isn't it? Really. Something I wanted to ask you about as well is I don't get many female guests on the show. For some reason, it just seems to be harder to get really good female guests. So I'm really glad that you joined me, because something that I'm really keen to get your views on is just sort of like women's wrestling as a whole. Obviously, over the last let's say 5 or 6 years, women's wrestling has seen a massive boost, a huge turnaround compared to what it was, like we were saying before. When we were growing up watching wrestling, it was in a pretty dark place. Women's wrestling,
Yeah.
only like 10 years ago, it was so bad. No disrespect to the women involved, but it was so badly handled, and so many incredibly talented women being wasted. And obviously, like I said, since the women's evolution in WWE, Impact with their women as well, Ring of Honor have been doing a great job with their women. Obviously, things have got a lot better, but recently, WWE seem to be back in that mold of just focusing on the same 4 or 5 women and sort of forgetting about everybody else. I don't want to be too critical of AEW, but obviously in their first 2 years, there's been a lot of criticism over the way that their women have been handled as well. So as a woman's wrestler, how do you feel about how women are being represented at the moment? Obviously, we had a main event match at WrestleMania this year, which was huge. Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair, which was massive, but things seem to be, they, from a fan's perspective, slipping back a
Yeah.
little bit. What's it like for you within the industry?
I mean, I feel like you're correct in the sense that women's wrestling is kind of, it's been on the uprise. Um, but I feel like at the same time, some people are just like, oh yeah, I'm super into women's wrestling. Let me put one match on the card now. Like it's still not getting the respect it deserves, but we've definitely made a lot of headway. I feel like, and you do have people like Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker who put on that lights out match, which was incredible. And I would definitely say a lot of women like Masha Slamovich, if you know her, La Rosa, Holly Dead, Evilise, they put on like top caliber matches, and I feel like their intensity and their strikes and whatnot, I feel like they're kind of very helpful in the independence as far as like getting women's wrestling to be on that same level as men. Um, but I think that's one of the things I always say as well. Like with Mission Pro, it was an all-female promotion. And I think at the beginning, it was nice to have people being like, oh yeah, all women's promotion, like this was great, this was a great show. But like now I'm almost at the point where it's like, okay, we understand it's an all women's promotion, but now you just need to acknowledge that it's just a great wrestling show. It's not just like, oh, great women's matches. Like, no, this is just a great show. Because women now are coming out of the woodwork, and we're all different shapes, sizes, capabilities. Some of us are zombies. Like, what? Like it's like it's nice to be able to get to do stuff like that. But obviously, we're always seem to be in the shadow of the males, sometimes on the higher level of wrestling, which kind of cracks me up. I just saw this like TikTok, and it's like, oh, women make less than men and blah, 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 blah. Like the way to fix that is to get jobs that like men have. So instead of being a woman lawyer, be a man lawyer. I'm like, shut up. But it's funny because it's like they're literally the same thing, but it's just like against the female or male. So it's, I didn't do it. I didn't do the joke justice, but that's how it was.
No, I get what you're saying. It's crazy, isn't it? Like, look at tennis players. People like Serena Williams. Serena Williams is hands down one of the greatest tennis players of all time. Not just women's tennis players. You know, she could
Yeah.
probably beat the majority of the men. And like you named a lot of women in there as well, wrestlers who I'm sure could put on and have put on better matches than the men. So I don't really understand how we can go from a WrestleMania triple threat main event, the first of its kind, groundbreaking moment, and yet then it almost felt like not like a side piece. I think that's the wrong word. It felt like it was a first ever for the sake of being a first ever. If you weren't then going to make it a consistent thing,
Yeah. I feel that. Yeah.
it's 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 weird. I've been a huge advocate of women's wrestling for such a long time. I just wish, like I say, they could do it more consistently. But that's just WWE. Like I said, Ring of Honor until their unfortunate news recently. What Maria Kanellis was doing over there with the women was fantastic. Impact have been consistent. Deonna Purrazzo is incredible. You know, their women's division is amazing. It just for some reason WWE have the biggest platform. They've given the women that big platform, but they don't seem to know how to book them outside of about 4 or 5 specific women. We all know who those are. Obviously, the four horsewomen and Bianca Belair. That's pretty much it. They go through these really weird spurts of doing great things and then just nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then literally everyone else is just kind of thrown, and hopefully you fit in this spot. Otherwise, you're just not on television.
Yeah, still getting 2 or 3 minute matches, just like 10, 15 years ago. But hey, we could talk about that all day. Let's move on from that. I'm gonna do a little quick fire round with you. I do this quick fire round with all my guests. Just gonna throw sort of like 7 or 8 questions at you. You can either go into as much detail as you want, or just give me a couple of word answers. I'm gonna start off with, for you, in your opinion, who is the greatest female wrestler of all time?
Jazz.
Jazz, okay. Not even a moment's hesitation, just straight there, Jazz.
She is. She just
Okay.
is.
Okay, I think I'm gonna know the answer to this because you've already said her name. But were you more Lita or Trish?
Lita. Oh my gosh, that feud. That was one of the first feuds that ever like drew emotion out of me. My brother was a Trish fan. I was a Lita fan. We fought after every match.
It was brilliant. Yeah, I think it's probably the greatest women's feud of all time. Certainly WWE. Anyway, it's the
Yeah.
first one that I properly remember as well. I loved Lita because she was obviously a part of Team Extreme. They were my favourites as well. Yeah, I've got all the time in the world for Lita. Austin or The Rock?
Probably The Rock.
Everybody says The Rock. I'm the only person who ever says Austin, and I don't know
I
why.
like Austin, but just like he's The Rock, Dwayne,
Yeah, fair
Dwayne
enough.
Johnson.
There's a reason he's the biggest star in the world, isn't it? He is The Rock. There you
Exactly.
go, he's The Rock. Okay, who would be your dream opponent?
Ooh, that's hard.
Can be
Dream.
past or present.
At some point, I want to wrestle Shazza McKenzie.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Love Shazza, yeah. That'd be great. Who has been your favourite opponent so far?
So far, I think Kylie Ray.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Another very, very
she's
talented
just
woman.
too happy. Pisses me off. Made it very easy to beat her up.
Where's your favourite place that you've wrestled? Like favourite venue?
Probably at Daly's place with AEW. It was just very first time ever like being in something like that.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, and then finally, three wrestling guests for your dream dinner party. Who would they be?
Oh my
That's
gosh.
a tough one. I know. Everybody that I ask that, they're like, "Oh my god, there's too many to choose from."
Yeah, I don't even like that many people. Um, one, let's see, Scotty Too Hottie. He was one of my favorites growing up. I don't know why. Well, I do. It's the worm in the flat top. It's him. Let's see. This is hard. Who are yours? Tell me yours, and I'll think.
Mine would be Eddie Guerrero.
Oh,
Um, easily Eddie Guerrero. I think Jeff Hardy.
I was gonna do that one.
Yeah, Jeff would be brilliant. Jeff would be great. And I think I would pick somebody from a bit more old school and probably go for either the Macho Man or Ultimate Warrior, just because it would be crazy. It would just
Yeah.
be the most insane dinner party with one of those guys there.
Touche, touche. Let's see. So I said Scotty Tuati, maybe Enzo, just for the funs of it.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
And yeah, I'd be a little wild. Maybe too wild. Um, too wild. And let's do Mankind. I
Okay,
feel
yeah,
like
yeah.
he has a very great mind. I was fortunate to meet him at NWA this past weekend, and he just has stories for days.
I love how involved he is. Like, obviously, he's still very linked to WWE. I don't know if he still works for WWE. He must have some sort of Legends deal or something, but he's just everywhere. Like, he's so
Yeah,
involved. He went to see Jim Ross yesterday after his cancer treatment. Like, he just seems like a really good guy, Mick Foley.
yeah.
I-
He does. Yeah, like uh, when he was there this weekend at NWA, he was like talking to everyone. It wasn't like, oh, I'm too good for this. He was like sitting talking to literally everyone who would talk to him.
Yeah, one of those guys who just wants to give back to the business, isn't he? Also, I would love to interview Mick Foley. I think we could talk for literally for days. Like, it would be like a 6 hour interview. Nobody would watch it because it would be too long, but I don't care. He would be incredible to talk to. Um,
Uh,
I Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for joining me. The last question that I always want to ask my guests, especially guests who are sort of like still on the independents. As much as I know who you are, and I'm a big fan, you have only been wrestling for 2 years, so I'm sure there are a lot of fans who are still not familiar with you. So the last question, the last segment that I put into all of my interviews is simply to put yourself over. So take as long as you want. Again, it can be short and sweet, or you can take your time and go into great detail. Why should people be paying attention to Madi Wrenkowski in 2022?
Gosh, I'm even harder. I mean, it just seems like a no-brainer. I mean, if you haven't seen me, clearly you need to. But yeah, I mean, I have Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all on Maddie_Wrenkowski. That's MADI_WRENKOWSKI. If you can spell it, you can find it. Sure, I'm the only one. But I don't know. We keep it real here. And who knows what the heck will happen to me in the next couple years.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'll put all of that in the description as well on YouTube and on the audio platforms. Have you got any shows coming up soon? You mentioned earlier that you had a couple of bookings. Where can people find you in the immediate future?
Yeah, I don't know when this is gonna drop, but like tomorrow I have Mission Pro against Lady Frost. She's gonna be in Texas, so it's like 80 degrees right here, so I'm not worried. And then I believe this upcoming Wednesday, I will actually be headed back to the DFW area for AEW coming too. So hopefully I get something out of that. But there's a couple more, but not as important as those two coming up.
Yeah, no, I will 100% be keeping an eye on what you're up to in 2022. I hope everybody else will as well. Maddie, like I said, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really glad we finally managed to do this. You have been an
Yes.
absolute delight to talk to. Guys, if you've enjoyed watching this, if you've enjoyed listening to this, like I said at the start, please hit subscribe, please hit follow, and I'll hope to catch you next time on It's My Wrestling Podcast.